everybody. I'm David Situ for the Octagon, and this will be the first of a series of current events podcast. And so today I am joined with Current Events Club founder, Avi.
Hi, I'm Avi.
All right, so Avi, what do you want to start out with talking about?
I think a lot what's neglected in like general discourse is the Hong Kong protests. They've been going on for 6 months, and they've been on and off in the news cycle. So I think we should definitely start with those.
Okay, yeah. So the Hong Kong protests were originally started as a result of the passage, or attempted passage of a bill that would allow extradition of Hong Kong prisoners and other prisoners to China, which was something that many people felt was an erosion of the kind of system that the Hong Kong government enjoys with mainland China and the one country two governments thing.
Yeah, it's important to note that like China has no longer is supporting that bill. That's no longer in legislation. That's because of the protests. So that's no longer a thing. That's a result of the protests. Another important thing to know is just this past Wednesday, the House of Representatives in the U.S. passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act by a vote of 417 to 1 and was unanimously passed by the Senate, which would essentially affirm Hong Kong's legal right to autonomy and also stand with the Hong Kong protesters. But it might be vetoed by Trump.
That is certainly a possibility. I mean, I think for me, the thing I'm just kind of wondering about is where are the protesters trying to go right now? I mean, the way I see it is their original goal has been fulfilled,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the point where a lot of protests fall apart, especially since they don't have a real centralized leadership. Like, these are our demands. This is what we want to do. But now that their main was been fulfilled, I don't really know what's going to happen now. 'Cause it seems like there's either some groups that are like, oh, we need to go Hong Kong free country, or that, okay, we've done our goal, kind of back it off a bit now.
It sort of turned into just general like pro-democracy protests, which I totally support, but it's really hard when you're just a single city trying to, protest against one of the world's biggest autocracies. It's really hard, and I mean, pushing for complete freedom from China is a very hard to achieve goal. And if after 6 months there's really been very little progress in that region, it's hard to see how these protests are going to continue to be effective. Yeah.
Yeah, now, in my opinion, from what I've seen, it seems more like general rioting, honestly, than protesting. Like, there's been so much damage done to the city that I'm honestly kind of shocked that protesters are still really behind this movement. I mean, I understand that for them it's like it's kind of all or nothing now for a lot of people, but I don't know if the end result that they're looking for is going to end up being what they want once they get there.
Yeah. I mean, they've increasingly embraced, violent tactics, right? They've definitely been attacking police. But at the same time, there's also brutal tactics by the police. So it's, there's been a mask ban. So there's, the upping of, hostilities on both sides. And I think at this point, there's really no end in sight.
Yeah, it just seems to keep escalating. I mean, like, the most recent thing is, I think it was a university or whatever.
Yeah,
and
it's
having
a hostage situation.
Or hostage or whatever. It's like a siege. It's pretty crazy what's going on with some of them. I mean, like, I don't really support either side. They both have their own issues, but I just think for me it's kind of getting a little unrealistic at this point. Because, like, what are their demands even technically? Is it just, total freedom?
Yeah.
I don't really see how that's feasible at this point. And at the same time, it seems very obvious that nobody is pleased with just going back to the status quo of, like, we do our thing, you do your thing, but not really. So,
So let's segue into the other types of riots, which are occurring as well in Asia, but this time in Iran. This is in reaction to the surge in gas prices instituted by the government there.
And so I think for me, one of the most notable things is that this has really not been covered at all, which I think is rather shocking. I mean, like, sure, Hong Kong, it's like in terms of protesting, Hong Kong is a big thing. They got a lot going on, but in terms of deaths and injuries, well, injuries is high, but deaths is pretty low. But then you look at this, and there's like hundreds, or at least over 100 people have been killed.
By Amnesty International. And that's really, crazy. And like the amount of oppressiveness compared to Hong Kong here is much more. Like, right, there's an internet blackout. Police are openly attacking residents, and there's a complete denial by the government there of anything happening. So it's really a big issue that's not only being ignored by the government but by international organizations, and it's really hard once again to see progress if no attention is being paid to this pretty big issue.
Yeah, I mean, I just think just now there's U.S. like government regard responses to the Hong Kong thing, and like they've even talked about it. But when you look at this,
Nothing.
nobody's talked about it. Nobody's really aware of it, and I just think that's kind of a little bit sad that it's just not being covered at all.
Yeah, I think part of that is because China's definitely more of an economic partner, is with the U.S. and as opposed to Iran, which in a lot of ways is not really viewed as that important of a country. I mean, they're really in a lot of ways they act as an adversary to the U.S. as opposed to a partner as compared to China. So it's definitely been neglected, possibly willfully.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility there. But in other news, on a less protesting way,
Yeah.
Venice is currently having one of I think the largest floods it's ever had.
Yes. It is flooding, and there has been a state of emergency that has been declared. And what's interesting to note is that they've been building a flood barrier to prevent this from happening. Right? This was supposed to be finished in like 2011.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's just been delayed and delayed
Constantly
and delayed.
delayed. And there was a whole scandal in which the mayor of the city, just funneled money for the project into his own personal finances. So it's a lot of corruption, and there's really been very little progress. And then there's a note that this might not even prevent the flooding, right? It's going to really act as something that can buy Venice more time while we come up with new solutions.
Yeah, it was like honestly, by the time they get this project finished, like if they finish it now, it would have helped this current problem.
Yeah, sure.
But by the time they get it finished in I think the projection is like 2030 or something, or like pretty late compared to now, it might not even be effective anymore.
Yeah. So there's a lot of important monuments and a lot of important historical things in Venice. If you see even like shops on the street are like up to like their water's right up to them. It's destroying local businesses, and like the negligence by the government has been, this seems to be a theme around the world. Just negligence leads to bad things. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's really saddening. I mean, Venice. I might be wrong about this, but I think it has one of the highest concentrations of historical sites and artifacts of most cities, I think, and a lot of these places are in danger of being permanently damaged because of this. Like, I know some of the notable churches and some of the other notable buildings or whatever. They've already sustained quite a bit of damage from previous flooding, and this might be kind of one of the final straws in keeping them original. At this point, they're definitely going to have to be restored, and the salt water itself is just really damaging to a lot of the architecture there.
You want to move on?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's talk about some more domestic policy.
Yeah, domestic issues. So we'll be covering two domestic issues, and that would be, of course, PG&E and their response to some of the things that's been occurring, and then of course, not of course, but another shooting happened on November 14th, 2019. So we'll be discussing both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to start with PG&E or?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, big surprise. A lot of people in California are experiencing another blackout from PG&E. I think it's affecting like 300,000 people.
Yeah, 400,000.
Something around that.
Yeah.
It's just kind of been crazy that these have been happening for so long. I mean, I understand why they're doing it. I think it is a legitimate tactic. It's just that it seems like they're really going for the wide-reaching, like really wide, just getting everything versus targeting certain areas that are the highest risk. But I mean, I understand why they're doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not wrong in saying that these times are high risk for wildfires.
And part of the issue is that they've done a poor job of warning residents by the shutoffs. And this has, of course, had a disproportionate effect on lower income families because they can't afford generators, they can't afford batteries. So this has a really large impact This is just a really irresponsible company in general. This kind of corruption isn't new with PG&E. This has been going on for like a long 20 years, decades. PG&E has been like neglecting the responsibility of citizens of California. They serve, I believe, like over half of California's residents, but all they do is they just, it's a for-profit motive, right? They're just pandering to their executives. They're giving executives high salaries, payouts to investors over infrastructure upgrades. So it's not really for the people. So I think there should be some sort of public option when it comes to electricity. And I know that's really a term that's often used for healthcare, but if there's no more for-profit motives and there's no having to appease investors, then that would really make it so the people of California are able to have more access to electricity and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm generally against a lot of the big government stuff. But I think
For
that
sure.
water and electricity, those kind of need to have a central oversight because you can just imagine there were 10 different electric companies. Imagine all the power lines, all the infrastructure for that. It just would not work. You kind of have to have the one company. As we've seen, having one company run privately has not really worked out.
Hmm.
As we can obviously see now with the gross negligence of the power lines and now resulting blackouts because they have to actually restore these power lines.
Yeah, and PG&E has publicly stated that these blackouts could continue for over a decade, which the impact we've already seen, the horrible impact on California residents. And if this continues, I mean, for a decade, that's ridiculous. And this is affecting hundreds of thousands of people at a time.
Mhm.
And even with these blackouts, like PG&E has publicly admitted that they've even still after the blackouts, they might have sparked fires. So it's like it's just a lot of issues with the company. So
Yeah, I mean, like, from what I understand, they're nowhere close to even examining all of the power lines, let alone start fixing them.
yeah,
And this has been going on for months. I mean, I'm not very optimistic, and like already, the damage to a lot of local businesses has been monumental. Like, the big chain companies, they can get away with losing some business every now and then, but like the little mom and pop shops, they can't really go without that, especially for these lengths of time. This
yeah.
isn't just like one day for an hour or two. This is days, all day.
And this was coupled with the consumer shift towards no longer brick and mortar stores, but big companies like Amazon. So it's really hard for local businesses to prosper.
Yeah.
So after this, our last topic
Mhm.
will be the shooting on November 14th
Mhm.
in Santa Clarita at Saugus High School.
Yeah. So another school shooting here, unfortunately. This is sadly becoming more and more common, though. Personally, I don't think it's as common as it's made out to be,
Oh, for sure.
obviously.
Yeah.
It's just that now, you get the one shooting, it's everywhere, versus maybe, 20, 30 years ago, this would be I mean, sure, it would be big news, but it wouldn't be broadcast all across the nation, for days. It's just.
Yeah, I feel like before school shootings were like, now it was like a national thing, but now I feel like society has in a lot of ways become desensitized to this. Like, I heard this on November 14th, and after that, I kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was just like, which shooting? Like it's gotten to that point where it's just like it's too normal now.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of inaction by lawmakers, and this is on both sides. This is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democratic issue. It's a lot of ways just it's a human issue, right? These are people who are dying, and we need lawmakers to come together and form a bipartisan sort of way to end not only the problem of school shootings, but shootings in low income areas.
Yeah, it's definitely a larger issue, and I mean, I think part of the issue is that it's not just a simple like one-step issue to solve. There's a lot more going on than just ban the guns and then we'll solve the problems.
Yeah.
A lot of these problems aren't just because people have access to guns. There's also underlying causes.
Yeah.
That I think that's the main thing we should be focusing on right now. I mean, I don't know if you differ on that, but I think our first step right now shouldn't necessarily be more gun control. I think as this shooting is proved, this was not a legal weapon that was used.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how banning more guns or banning different types of guns is going to prevent this issue if people can already get access to illegal weapons. I think the first step right now should be addressing the root issue, which is why do people want to shoot schools?
Yeah. So I think it's definitely a societal issue. a lot of Democratic lawmakers propose these one-stop solutions like federal buyback or complete gun control. I don't think that's not only it's not first of all it's not gonna appeal to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, and it's not necessarily gonna work either, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've seen countries like Britain completely ban guns altogether, and we've seen their rates of violent crimes actually go up, just not from guns. So I think, this might be like a hot take, but I do think we should have some sort of gun education in schools.
I actually really agree with that. I mean, I think you should understand how to be safe around weapons. I mean, like your parents teach you, don't run around with knives, don't run around with scissors. I mean, I think it's kind of common sense to take that to
Yeah.
the next step and being like, this is another dangerous item. This is how you should be responsible around them.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think for me, the other thing is that a lot of the gun violence isn't just, the crimes and school shootings, stuff like that. A lot of it is suicide.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of the issue that is not really addressed that often. It's usually just the knee-jerk reaction to shootings and ban the weapon that was used and we'll solve the problem. And I don't really see how that's going to change anything.
It's important to note that over the past decades, suicides have increased drastically.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a strong indicator that mental health is not being focused on in the right ways. It's definitely not being offered to as many people as it should be necessarily. As that seems, I mean, suicide
Of course,
seems
yeah.
like the natural result from a lack of mental health
Mhm.
care. So,
I think we ought to remove the stigma from, mental health and discussing it, right? There's a lot of negligence when it comes to insurance companies and ignoring mental health claims and all kinds of things. So it's really not just a quick issue that can be solved by one thing. And there needs to be a broader effort by lawmakers to address the root of the problem. So,
okay. Well, I think that will be all the topics we'll cover for today. Thanks for talking with me, Avi.
yeah, thanks for the discussion. It was really good.
All right, this has been David Situ for the Octagon.
And I'm Avi
Thanks for-
Krishna.
All right, thanks for listening.